Welcome to Tennis Spin, where we put our spin on your tennis. Today, I'm going to be talking about length of rackets, like how long they are. Viewer question. I'm Mateus from Argentina, and I have a question for you. Why is so difficult to find extended frames? I worked in the tennis industry for 20 years for Fischer, Kirschbaum, and Salenko. And the only way to get a long frame is to ask a pro player for a pro stock frame. And no, Babolat is not an option, LOL. Try to find an old frame in a used market. Please, I love if you can make a video about it. Sure, Mateus, here you go. Have asked me, why are there different lengths in some rackets and not in others? Well, it kind of comes down to supply and demand, mostly demand. So hold tight. So companies like Babolat make longer versions of their two most popular rackets. My favorite, Pure Aero Banana and the Pure Drive. They both come in longer versions. They only come in longer versions in the standard and in the tour. So they don't make it in the light and they don't make it in the team. So why is that? So they believe that people of a certain level, usually adults, possibly juniors, want that extra length. But what does that extra length do? Well, it gives you more power. You know, people always say, well, I get extra reach. Guys, it's half an inch. Unless you're holding it, you know, kind of up here and negating that half inch, is not going to help you that much. It also changes the way this racket flexes. So when you add half an inch here, there will be more drag. I would say there's about 4 to 6 inches of drag. So you will have to get the racket through a little faster because the racket head's going to drag a little more from the extra half inch. But you will gain a little more power because of that. Every quarter inch, every half inch you add will gain you a little more power. Now, so they really only make longer rackets in the popular rackets. Like this E-Zone is made also in a half inch longer. Again, it's basically meant for somebody who's looking for a little more power. There is a difference in feel. Now, if you play with a standard one and then you switch to the longer one, you'll be like, hey, the longer one's got more power. That is true. Okay? Now, they don't do it to every racket, but certain rackets only come in longer versions. So in the Serena, this is the Blade 104, not the Serena Signature Edition. This only comes in a longer. So it comes half inch longer. And it only comes that way. Because they probably tested it and played with it, and it plays better this way. And this customer would want it just a half inch longer. Serena, we know her actual racket is actually 1 whole inch longer. That's the way she wants it. So a little more power, a little extra reach, right? Good for her. In this Pure Drive 107, right, it's 0.2 inches, so it's about a quarter inch longer. So the trend is that when they make a racket a little bigger, a la 105, 107, 110s, 115s, they tend to add a little more length to it because they feel that it will play better. It will give that bigger, lighter racket a little more power. Now, why doesn't everyone do it? Wilson with the #1 racket, the Clash, right, doesn't do it. Why don't they do it? Well, there's not a whole lot of demand for it. Why don't they do it with the Roger racket? Why don't they do it with the Pro Staff? There's no demand. I mean, I probably sell maybe 1% longer rackets. So 99 out of 100 rackets that walk out of here is going to be a standard length racket. So it takes that, a special person looking for that ½ inch longer, that little more power, that would buy that. But most of the people nowadays go with standard length rackets. Therefore, Wilson on these standard hundreds really don't make it. Head, as another company brand, doesn't really go long either. They're another company that doesn't see a big market in the longer rackets. But I want to say about 20 years ago, longer racket was in, right? Everybody had a longer racket. It got up to like 5 inches longer. So a standard racket is 27. Like this Bubba, which came out, this is the recent Bubba, but there was an original Bubba that was exactly like this. It was 32 inches long. Standard racket again, 27. So 5 inches longer. So the original Bubba that came out a little like over 20 years ago was 32 inches long. Can you imagine this Bubba being 32 inches? A standard racket again is 27. This is only 2 inches longer at 29, right? But that was when the revolution of longer rackets came out. There was even a 6'1", 95 long, and that was 1 inch longer. So do you guys remember a 28-inch Pro Staff? I do. It actually played better, in my opinion, but hey, that was then. But Dunlop kind of came out with a full line of long bodies or long something. It was just longer rackets. Prince had long rackets. Everybody had long rackets. It was the long revolution. As time went by, they went from 1 inch to a ½ inch to a ¼ inch, and now they've kind of settled in on about a ½ inch on most rackets. So long was in back then. I mean, everybody was long, but everybody's kind of standardized now back to a 27-inch. Another viewer question from Ara Tristan. Hi from the Philippines. I have a question. I have an extended length racket, and I was thinking of cutting ½ inch. Will it be the same as the standard length version of it? Here you go. So back when Dunlop was huge in longer rackets, I'm going to tell you a story. So I used one of their rackets. I don't remember the name of it, and it was 1 inch longer. So I decided that I was going to cut it. Like, my buddy had a shop. He actually had one of those table saws, and I decided to, I took the butt cap off, and I dropped the saw on it, and I took 1 inch right off. Put the butt cap back on, and put the grip on, and started playing with it. I was shocked at how it played. So what did I do to the racket? Imagine if this racket, the long version, right, was cut by a ½ inch. So back to the standard version, right? You would think that if you cut it, it would be okay, that it would play like this. No, that was actually a huge mistake. When they make these long rackets, there's a flex that goes on in these. So it's built for that extra ½ inch. So when you hit it, there's a flex, there's a point in which when it hits it, it flexes in a certain way that gives you power and feel. So what did I do when I cut it? I basically altered the whole racket just by taking 1 inch off of the bottom. So it felt like a kid's racket that was strung super tight. it felt dead. It felt like, I mean, the only thing I can describe it as, it almost felt like a wooden racket because it lost power, it lost feel, it didn't flex. I basically negated the flex of the racket. So somebody out there who asked me, I have a long racket and I want to cut it down, don't do that. You will basically screw up that whole racket. I would, if I were you, I would either sell it and buy a new one, or try to play with it, maybe choke up on it a little bit like that to negate the 1/2 inch. But do not cut it. Do not cut it. You are talking to somebody with personal experience on cutting a racket. It basically jacks up the whole racket. But do you guys like long rackets, or do you guys like standard rackets? Have you tried a long racket? The market seems to be not dying, but going, slowing down with longer rackets. So if you like longer rackets, buy them now, because I think they're gonna, in the next years, they're probably gonna start slowing down the production of those. All right, so thank you for watching Tennis Spin, where we put our spin on your tennis.